Go ahead.
You can't make it that obvious.
Well, again, like you had paused, like you had this thought.
No, I was gonna say it's a tough one because like I feel like it hasn't really affected me,
All right.
like personally ever. So I never even think about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
So
the most I ever had to learn about the Constitution was pass my immigration test.
sure, you pass your immigration test. Well, actually, that makes you an excellent person to talk to in terms of what the Constitution means to you. So yeah, and that's fair. But okay, so the Constitution doesn't mean much for you. Does it not mean much? Does it not mean much to you personally, or do you think that are you saying it doesn't affect my life, or are you saying that can you clarify that part?
I have no idea how it affects my life.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Like I'm sure it does. It has to.
All right.
All the amendments, right?
Right.
I'm sorry, I can't really help.
You want to chime in here?
I don't know, it kind of affects me.
Okay.
First off, I'm
Okay.
So the voting thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then being 18 to vote, that was also added.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, there's not much that I can think of that affects me.
Okay, I see. It's interesting that you would pick certain identities that you have that you've selected for yourself, and then said that's how it fits. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if I would have necessarily picked out, because I mean, like, okay, so the kind, like, I'm over 18 and I can vote, but I wouldn't have thought of that as how it affects me necessarily.
All right, you're not at that age.
Sure.
I'm still 16.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Maybe if I was 16, that's what I would be thinking about right now. Is that it only, it affects me because I'm, going to be 18 or something, and then that seems more in your head. Sure.
Well, I'm there too. I can finally vote now.
Right.
Well, I don't know. I guess if you have no opinion on the matter, then it doesn't affect you. But if you care about political matters, then it bothers you.
Mm-hmm. So, my research is about Federalists and the Anti-Federalists during the ratification debates. The Federalists want to approve the Constitution as proposed in the Philadelphia Convention. The Anti-Federalists
are... The first one or the second one?
The second. So the first one...
Was Articles.
The Articles of Confederation. That was that done in New York, I think? And so that one... There was a problem with that it wasn't. Actually, I should rephrase this because I don't want to keep making that same historical mistake. There was a perceived issue with the Articles of Confederation that some people mentioned, namely the people who were the representatives in the body that was the Articles of Confederation, the Congress, I believe, actually it was called at that time. They basically realized they had no power because they didn't have the power to tax. So all they could do was borrow money under the Articles of Confederation. So under the Articles of Confederation, the Confederation had all this debt, but it couldn't pay them off because the states weren't giving. The states were supposed to voluntarily give them money, and this was a way for the states to maintain control over this confederated government. That the confederate government could never do anything without them because they have to voluntarily give up their money to that that confederation. So. And I forget the amount of years that goes by. I think it's something between 3 and 8. But it wouldn't be. I don't think it was even a decade. And they were saying, we got all this debt. We can't pay it off. We need to revise the Articles of Confederation. Let's get together a whole bunch of delegates, go to the Philadelphia Convention, and we'll revise Articles of Confederation. They met in secret. Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, James Madison. These guys, they get together and they close the doors. They say, we don't want the public looking at what we're doing right now, because what they're really thinking within the first 2 meetings or so, they said, what we really need to do is scrap the whole Articles of Confederation and do a whole new Constitution. Right. So then the rest of this Philadelphia Convention was about what this new Constitution will be. James Madison is kind of like the not the sole author, but he's kind of like the father of the Constitution. It was basically his brainchild, and a lot of different compromises went through, and so then the Constitution is then proposed, and the Constitution says if 3/4 of the states ratify, then this is the law of the land. The Articles of Confederation said all the states had to agree. If one state said no, you couldn't change the Articles. And that's one of the reasons why they didn't want to change the Articles, because they couldn't get all the states to agree.
Right.
And so they said, well, 3/4 would be enough, and here's our Constitution. They sent it out to the public, and then James Madison and Alexander Hamilton, they write the Federalist Papers, which we all know and are familiar with, and then these things get published in newspapers and things, and then the Anti-Federalists respond to those papers, and they say the Constitution should not be ratified, and then Alexander Hamilton and Madison are saying it should be ratified, and so that's the debate. So I guess I was just kind of getting to the core of what do people think about the Constitution. You know what I mean? Like, if we don't assume that we automatically assent and agree with the Constitution, if we actually bring the Constitution into a thing of debate in today, how do we feel about it? Like, is there things that we think it should be revised or amended or changed? Things that have failed, things that it was positive. So I guess that's kind of the responses I'm looking for from people is, to get back in the minds of this is a piece of paper that we have to assent to, that has to be ratified. Get in the head of that. This should be a thing that's debated and not something that should be assumed. Because I think that currently in politics, it's just assumed. The Constitution is, for me, I almost get the sense from a lot of people, especially, not to single this religious group out, Mormons or Church of, Latter-day Saints, that they feel that the Constitution came from God. And this is from two different Mormons that I can think of. They actually think that God, was helping out Madison writing the Constitution and getting it all ratified because God knew the United States would eventually help Israel, and God loves Israel. And this is kind of maybe this is my naive or uneducated understanding, but to me, I don't like this because that means that the Constitution is perfect.
Which it's not.
We're right.
But see, then I can't single out one single, I can't single something out and be like, this is what's wrong with it. I mean, there's multiple things that are wrong with it, which is why we have the whole amendment process.
Sure.
Which is there's the three branches, and then the judicial group is supposed to enforce the Constitution,
right. And
Congress and the Senate essentially just the Congress is supposed to ratify and fix it as needed. So I don't know.
So you think the separation of powers things is good?
Yes.
Okay.
Without that, we would kind of be screwed.
Right.
You can't have one person rule in the government.
Well, you can in terms of possibilities.
Possibility, yes, but will it be a thriving country?
Sure.
Would we be where we are with a single person?
Right.
Can you honestly expect one person
to... Do you know where we are right now?
Yeah, okay, so...
No. I mean, over the years. We've been a pretty successful country over the years. Granted, right now we're kind of screwed, but,
So this is kind of one of the things I've been thinking about. Come on.
The PSA is at 28, so I left it for now. It's so awkward.
I'm not doing it until they are gone.
This is going to be like a 2-minute little tirade, but... So Montesquieu is the philosopher that thought of the system of checks and balances by the separation of powers. And, he identifies it... And so he identifies the separation of powers in... What's that? Yeah, we're on tape.
Why?
Because I'm using this for a research project.
Shirley,
no, you can come on in. I don't
love to you on tape.
Can I sit on your lap, Thanos?
If only this was had video.
Don't sit my My name's Charles.
I really need to catch the jokes that we have down here. Like if I had caught Patrick saying, could you bend over, Jacob, a little more? Or if I had caught some of the things that Tony had said a little earlier, that'd been great. Replay back for him. So Montesquieu is the one who says, okay, there should be the small republics, and they should be of small size. And during the ratification debates, Montesquieu was like, the guy. People thought he was the smart, he was the trendy political theorist at the time. So all of these different things that Montesquieu is suggesting is kind of what he feels are improvements over a monarchical system, where you have a monarch who rules. And the problem with that is that when you have a good monarch, things are great. But eventually, you get a bad monarch, either through heredity, or you get a good monarch to start out with, and then slowly over time he gains more and more power, and more power becomes concentrated, and it just becomes too tempting to use that power to oppress people. So the reason why the king has power to begin with is it goes back to the feudal arrangement, right, from the Middle Ages. The king protects the peasants, in return the peasants give the king a little bit of his crops, which he can then sell for money to support the knights, to support the castle, to protect the peasants. So it's this reciprocal relationship that the peasants give up something, and then in return the king returns back. But in small incremental amounts, that lord of the castle gets more and more power and becomes less and less scared of a peasant uprising. And eventually he can accumulate so much power in which he doesn't have to worry about the peasants at all. He has so many knights, he can kill them all and knows he can keep them in fear, or at least, keep them in fear. And now he can oppress them and use the money that they have, or the stuff they have given him to help protect him, and he uses that to oppress them. And so this is the danger of the monarchical system, is that this concentration of power has a tendency to slowly accumulate. That it's that word by the phrase, or that quote by Acton, that power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely, right? So so Montesquieu says we should have this separation of checks and balances, or separation of powers and checks and balances, and so there you have these three branches, and that if you have these branches competing against each other, and you have the politicians, representatives, accountable to the people through a vote, and then the politicians have to constantly compete to keep their office, to keep their power, that this will keep the system in check, that this will keep them from going too far, too quickly. And I think that worked pretty good for the first, say, 50 years of the Constitution.
That's true.
But then eventually you had such an accumulation of power in one federal government that it was able to kill, 150,000 Southerners when they said, we don't want out of this deal. We can, I don't think the Civil War was about slavery. I think it was really about the tariff. I think there was a lot of propaganda that kind of made it about slavery on the southern and the north side. So the South used the issue of slavery in a propaganda way to get the Southerners riled up, and then say the North wants to destroy your culture. The North wanted to use it as a moral thing. But I think ultimately, when you get deep down, it was all about the tariffs that the North was putting on the South, and how the South didn't like the way they were being taxed, and they said, we want out. So at least the way I'm looking at history, is it's saying that even in a republic, even with the Constitution, even with checks and balances and separation of powers, right now, could the average person, if they wanted to, if 70% of the Americans wanted to revolt against the government, would that be an easy thing? If 50% wanted to revolt, you know what I mean? It's not a very easy thing. I think the military crush is pretty good with machine guns and tanks and things like that, bombs and airplanes. So we're kind of stuck, you know what I mean, in terms of if the concentration of power is so great, the ruler no longer has to be afraid of the peasant so much. There's the vote thing, but votes can be rejiggered and corrupted, and you know what I mean. So I just think that there is if you look at when the Constitution was founded and what people had in their ideas, what it meant compared to today, you can see that slowly, incremental, increasing concentration of power in all the government and state governments. I mean, how many laws do we have today? It's volumes and volumes thick, so much that no one lawyer knows them all, or even knows all the laws in his specific field and specialty. And then there's case law, which is kind of pseudo-law, and then there's executive orders, which are pseudo-executive law, and then you have bureaucracies that are created and given power to make bureaucratic regulations. And so, right now we sit in a hospital, and how many regulations are there on how to provide medical care? And are they all good? Are they all bad? Could a hospital decide whether they're good or bad? And then patients decide whether they want to go to that hospital. You know what I mean? None of that's an option. It's all regulated and controlled. And I'm wondering if that concentration of power is an issue for people. Sorry, that was more than 2 minutes.
Yeah. But I can guarantee you most people don't think of it that way.
Oh no, I know.
No, it's just, you don't think about it at all.
Yeah.
You don't, not until it's mentioned.
Yeah. So now that I kind of
it's an interesting way of looking at it.
Yeah. So now that I spit that out, what are your thoughts?
I don't think any government's. It's gonna end up being. There's no way that you can get a government to completely work as a republic or a monarchy or something else, if you call it something else. There's no way that you can have a representative government that consistently remains a representative government. After a while, the people give them that kind of power.
Yeah, yeah.
Psychology.
Right, right.
You give the person power, they're going to feel like they're in power.
Yeah.
I think people are like sheep. We can't take care of ourselves, most of us. Some people can, but we need someone to take care of us.
Reminds me of, I think, a quote from Jefferson. He thought that, it's one of these little obscure paper quotes, I think, but he says that he feels that a little revolution is needed from time to time, say every 10 or 20 years. So that in his mind,